All right. In what I thought would be a Detroit domination over the weekend against Washington, they were the number one seed. They're at home, 15 wins. Instead, it was they who got dominated by Washington and their rookie quarterback, Jayden Daniels. And I know Jared Goff didn't have anything close to the game he was looking for. I think he was around 50% completions, 4 turnovers, 3 of which were interceptions. One was a fumble on the second series where they were down inside Washington's 20-yard line. But with or without Goff's poor performance, Detroit's defense had no answers for Washington's offense. I mean, here's a case where Detroit scored 31 and yet lost by 14. And so, it was an all-around disappointing and poor performance by the Lions. I know nobody in Detroit saw that coming. I'm not even in Detroit, and I didn't see it coming. But now Washington has earned their way into the NFC Championship game, a game which they haven't been in since 1991-92 season when I quarterbacked the Lions and we went to Washington, ended up losing, and Washington went on to beat Buffalo Bills a couple weeks later in the Super Bowl. We got the Houston Texans losing to Kansas City in frigid weather where, Texans went in with a disadvantage anyway, being a dome team in Texas. And, but all season long, it's, even though it's Patrick Mahomes and, Andy Reid offensively and Travis Kelce, it's really the defense this year for Kansas City that has controlled games. And in this case, it was no different. I think Texans had 14 points, and Kansas City didn't cause any turnovers, but they did sack a quarterback, C.J. Stroud, 8 times, and the Texans really never looked in this game. Whereas Kansas City, all season long offensively, their offensive pass protection has been sieve-like, and it's only been in the last few weeks that they've seemingly got that back on track. Yes, they did give up 3 sacks, but none of which I don't think really thwarted any drives, big drives for Kansas City. And once again, Travis Kelce, I would say, had an off season production wise, but here he showed up and saved his best, at least for the latest, where he had 8 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown, and obviously was their leading receiver. And again, here's Kansas City. They've played in 7. Now this will be their 7th straight AFC Championship game, and here they're going for a Super Bowl three-peat, something that's never been done before. The Ravens really going to Buffalo, and probably the marquee matchup of the weekend turned out to be a great game, a game which I thought Baltimore would win. And I know it's become popular now to say, Lamar Jackson has had playoff troubles, and this clearly wasn't his best game. He did have a couple turnovers. He threw an interception and had a fumble. The fumble really was the bigger of the two, but he did come back after that and played flawlessly, played great, in fact. Great passes, great scrambles. It was really Mark Andrews that had a huge fumble himself and dropped the 2-point conversion that probably would have sent the game into overtime. And I know, people talk about it's the quarterback that loses the game. Well, in my opinion, not in this case. Josh Allen, on the other hand, simply didn't turn the ball over. I mean, he threw for 120-something yards, no touchdowns, really no big plays, but they didn't have any turnovers, fumbles, or interceptions. And that really was the difference in the game. And now Buffalo goes to Kansas City for a rematch of what was last year's divisional round playoff game, where Kansas City escaped with the win. And as I mentioned before, Kansas City's going for a Super Bowl three-peat. Well, in the last 3 times the teams all had a chance to three-peat as Super Bowl champions. They never got past the wild card or the championship game round. So obviously, with the compelling nature of Buffalo and Kansas City anyway, this is going to make that championship game in Kansas City that much more compelling. Then the last game was the Rams that I predicted would be the upset special of the weekend going to Philadelphia. They played a tough game, both offensively and defensively. They sacked Jalen Hurts. The Rams did, I think, 7 times. But I think in the end, it was really Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter, yes. Saquon Barkley, the combination of his running and Jalen Carter's domination down the stretch defensively, that was the difference in this game. Jalen Hurts had gotten hurt his knee, was relatively ineffective as a passer, and basically turned into the handoff guy for Saquon Barkley, who went over a couple hundred yards and 2 huge, long touchdown runs. And then defensively, down the stretch, Jalen Carter was a wrecking machine. He caused a fumble on Kyren Williams, the Rams running back, where he punched the ball out and then gave nonstop pressure against Matthew Stafford the last 2 or 3 series of the game. And, so now the Rams, unfortunately, will be at home with the rest of us watching the games from here on. But I think the Rams showed a lot of promise. And even though they didn't win this game, have shown a lot of promise for next season. All right, so it's AFC and NFC Championship Game weekend. And we've got first the Buffalo Bills going to Kansas City Chiefs. Now the Chiefs are going for the 7th AFC Championship game appearance and looking to become the NFL's first 3-peat Super Bowl champion. And you've got Allen looking to become, he's 0-3 so far against Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. And so now looking to break that string. You've got a Chiefs team that coming in, has not lit things up, at least offensively, and been saving Travis Kelce, who's now 35 years old, for the playoffs. And turns out last week against the Texans in their first playoff game, he comes out with 7 catches for 117 yards and 3 touchdowns. And you've got, Kansas City, the coaching combination of Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo have just been flawless, really, all season. And so I think for Buffalo to really have a chance, they're going to have to run the ball effectively with a combination of James Cook and Allen, quarterback, and then have long drives, long sustained game-controlling drives that end in touchdowns to keep this close. A game, I think, that will be close. And the Chiefs, having now won 16 one-score games in a row, come out on top in this one. And I'll give the score 27-25 to Kansas City. Switching over to Washington, going to Philadelphia to play the NFC Championship game. Washington has been really the surprise team of the year, and Jayden Daniels in particular. But it's been a whole combination of the head coach with Dan Quinn getting his second job as a head coach after taking Atlanta there for 5 years. And he's been successful everywhere he's been, even as a coordinator. And so Washington, who you would think would need to create a lot of turnovers in this game in order to keep it close, really was only created 17 turnovers in the whole season. And yet, when Dan Quinn was a defense coordinator at the Cowboys, 3 years in a row, they led the league in turnovers. Last week against the Detroit Lions, they forced 5. The week prior against Tampa Bay, they only had 1, but was effective. And so, again, I think for Washington to keep this game close, they're going to need to run the ball well with the combination of Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler and Jayden Daniels. And for Philadelphia, they have been dominant on both sides of the ball up front, and especially lately with Jalen Carter defensively at tackle has been a wrecking ball. And so I think that they're going to have to neutralize him. I think the big matchup of this game is going to occur up front for Washington, in that Trent Scott is replacing the initial starter, Sam Cosmi, at offensive guard, and his matchup is going to be Jalen Carter. And so I think that's going to create some havoc in the backfield for Jayden Daniels. Even though he's a great athlete, he's most effective when he can throw from the pocket. And I think Jalen Carter is going to disrupt that. So I think the Philadelphia Eagles continue to hit home runs on the ground with Saquon Barkley. And I think this game is going to go, say, 2014 Philadelphia. Now let's move on to a few coaching changes. And we've got Ben Johnson, who I thought and a lot of the people thought was the Bears' first choice. They ended up getting him, and now Ben Johnson gets his first NFL head coaching experience. And I think what he was looking for, the Bears provided. They had the right combination of organization, which they clearly demonstrated in the interview process of what he was looking for. And then look at their cupboard. They've got a lot of young talent. They've got, a lot of draft capital, a lot of salary cap space, and one of the better young quarterbacks in the league, at least looking to the future, in Caleb Williams. And I think from here, Ben Johnson's job is going to be to come in, create the culture that he's looking for, and the atmosphere of accountability and work ethic that's going to result in things turning around there in Chicago. And so I think he'll find that he's going to have to delegate some of the little things that he probably once took care of himself. Then we look on to the Lions themselves, who have now lost both of their coordinators, Ben Johnson, of course, going to the Bears, and Aaron Glenn, having just been named the head coach of the Jets. But I think with every good organization, this is the nature of the business. And so with good programs and good coaches, those coaches are going to get opportunities to ascend elsewhere. And so the Lions, being one of the better organizations, I think have this plan in place all along. And in my opinion, what's going to happen is those two positions, offense and defense coordinator, will be filled from within the current coaching staff in Detroit.